Okay, we're live. So I'll just kick it off. So I'm Vanessa here from the Imagination Foundation, and this is our inaugural Imagination on Air for our new series of webinars that we're kicking off. And today we're with SparkFun and Derek Runberg from SparkFun, who is the curriculum curator for SparkFun. He's going to do some really cool demos for us with MakeyMakey and also feature the digital Sandbox and demystify some of its components for everybody. And also Mike McGalliard is here. Did I say your name correctly? That's horrible. The founder and executive director of Imagination Foundation, who can talk a little bit about the process of using tools like SparkFun, and SparkFun in particular, who's one of our partners in the process of creative play, which all of our chapter leaders around the globe are using to engage their students in innovation and discovery. I will also be joined by Jean Kaneko, who will show up on the call really soon, and she's a STEAM education specialist, and she's also the co-founder, well, actually the founder of the Exploratory in Culver City, Los Angeles. And she's going to come on and talk about how she actually has been using SparkFun and MakeyMakey in particular with her chapter group there. So, Mike, do you want to say a few words about the partnership and how this came about with SparkFun and why you think it's such an awesome thing, which we all agree with?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I can't hear you. Hold on one sec. Maybe you're muted? Nope. I could hear you a moment ago. Maybe if you unplug your headphones, it'll work fine.
Hello? Can you
Better.
hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. Hello? So I'm not really all that experienced with electronics, which is an important disclaimer, because we imagine that many of our chapter leaders aren't also. And it's not a prerequisite for being a chapter leader. What's most important is understanding the importance and the know-how, the value of creative play, which is that kids build whatever they're passionate about, using whatever resources they have available. I only wish we did this webinar, though, after this weekend, because I am going to play around with MakeyMakey and my 8-year-old daughter and see how two people who don't understand the product all that well, engaging with it to see what happens, which is always really fun. But what I did want to say to start off things is how happy we are with the partnership with SparkFun. SparkFun is one of our first product suppliers. We felt like, cardboard, that's been our focus for so long. And cardboard, you want more than that. So we were talking with a few partners, and SparkFun was particularly interested in working with us to get additional tools in the hands of our chapter leaders. And for the first round of shipments to our chapter leaders, we experimented with more complex sets. And it didn't work for everyone. I think maybe the entry point was a bit too high. People found their way through it. Chapter leaders found their way through it. But MakeyMakey was the tool that pretty much was an access point for everybody. And what interests me most about it, always, even when I first learned about it, is how it bridges the gap between materials that kids are familiar with and materials and tools they're not. The obvious example being like a Play-Doh or something that they play with and they can handle. They know it, but then connecting it to a digital system, to a computer, is new, and how that bridge elevated their skills in some unexpected ways. So the idea that starting with familiar materials, introducing a new tool like MakeyMakey, and then escalating their experience with more complex tools was a really natural process. So that's sort of my intro, but I'm also curious to watch Derek's demos on the product too, as I get ready to teach my daughter about MakeyMakey.
Awesome. Well, we can have a little follow-up webinar. You can take some video of you and your daughter. You can post it after. Great. See what you guys discover. Okay, so we have a few viewers on. Of course, everyone can post questions on the side if you would like to, as Derek is presenting. And I'll just let you take it away, Derek, and then we can maybe stop and reflect on some things if we decide.
Perfect. Sounds good. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay. So, my name is Derek. I've been working for SparkFun for just under 3 years now. My official background is in architecture. So I was an architecture student, got my undergrad degree in architecture. So I'm very fond of cardboard, making tiny things out of cardboard. And huge, Mike, one of the things when you talked about what do we add to cardboard, and that's been my passion at SparkFun. And I got into, when I graduated out of architecture school, I did a weird kind of 180 and went into tech ed. So I was a middle school tech teacher for 5 years, and walked into my principal's office one day and said, I'm going to teach electronics. And he said, do you have any qualifications to do that? I said, no. And I said, well, I want to teach these programmable electronics that don't seem that technical. And he said, don't teach kids that. It will be boring to them, and they'll fall asleep on you. And I turned around, walked out of his office, and at that very minute, I bought a class set of a SparkFun kit. And so one of the things that I am a big proponent of is jumping in and learning next to your kids. And that goes for both the MakeyMakey, which for a lot of people is pretty straightforward, but also the digital sandbox, which I'm going to show you and demo some stuff for everybody. First things first, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the MakeyMakey, and in my kind of stationary video setup, it's going to be really hard to demo it actually working. So I'm gonna show a quick product video of it that we did with some students, and then I'm gonna do an actual, because I can hold up the digital sandbox. I'm gonna do a product demo with the digital sandbox, and hopefully people can ask questions and things like that. I can see that chat is already open and people are adding to it. So with that, this board is the MakeyMakey. If you're kind of my age or a little bit older even, you'll notice that it looks very much like a Nintendo controller. You can use it as a Nintendo controller. Along the bottom here, this is called Earth or Ground. And you have the up, down, left, right arrows. This is a space key. So this is a space and your mouse click, your mouse left click. On the back, it might be hard to see, but you have mouse movements on the right side. You have the WASD keys, and if you're a gamer, you'll know what those are for, especially if your students use Minecraft a lot, they'll know that. And then more earth pins at the bottom, as well as some other pins at the top that are used later on if you want to use this as an Arduino. And what this is, it's all about building a circuit, connecting one of these keys, one of these pads, to Earth. So how do we do that? Well, this uses capacitance. So we're all kind of a battery. Humans produce, we have a little bit of an electric charge. And then the other idea is conductivity. Things, depending on the voltage, things are conductive. I'm conductive. If you put enough voltage through me, you can use me as a wire. I prefer not to be used as a wire. You can use wire or copper tape as something that's conductive, and you can build circuits with this. With that, I'm going to open up the video here. I'm going to share my screen. And I am going to open up the video and hit play. Hopefully the audio for this works.
The MakeyMakey allows you to turn all sorts of things into a key. It's got an onboard Atmega32U4 that's totally reprogrammable, and it talks to your computer like a keyboard or a mouse, allowing you to hook up all sorts of crazy things. Using high-resistance switching, this board can tell when you've hooked things up, even if they aren't super conductive. Things like Play-Doh, pasta, people, potatoes. Just by plugging it into the computer and using some alligator clips, I can turn these potatoes and Play-Doh into a piano. MakeyMakey is a wonderful tool if you want to reprogram it and get really into it, but it's also a really great tool for beginners and a really powerful tool for education. But don't take my word for it. So I'm going to plug this into a potato, and I'm going to take the other end, and I'm going to touch it. And it's still... Who thinks the Play-Doh is going to make a connection? It's making the connection. What about the pear? What do we think about the pear?
Yes.
Yes. Make the connection. So it's making a connection. Okay. What do we think?
Yes.
Maybe. So what do we think?
I think that the two wires can emit electricity from inside. The tiny bit of your body can change the electricity.
What if we all held hands and you held the end and we tried to complete this? Do we think this will work?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It all works. The electricity is going through all of us.
So, that's a quick introduction video, and that's actually on the product page for the MakeyMakey. So if you want to share that with your kids, just a minute. Sorry about that. If you want to share that with your kids, that's a great kind of inspiration or a start for them so that they understand, start to just understand not the electrical concepts behind it, but just what is this thing and what does it do. Another one is the original MakeyMakey Kickstarter video. No matter who you are, it makes you smile. So that's another thing that I would look into. But the main idea is that this shows up as a keyboard. So if you plug this into your computer, you shouldn't need any extra software. So you plug it in with a USB cable, and you plug it in the USB port. You don't need any administrative use. It shows up as a keyboard, and you can start playing with it using alligator clips. So these guys, these wires with these alligator-looking guys. They're called alligator clips, and you can start building and connecting things. You can connect them to copper tape. So I think we included this in the kit. So this is some copper tape. It's conductive. It's normally used. It's interesting. The normal use for that is when people are doing professional level doll houses. It's what they use to wire the lights in doll houses. So that's what it's used for. It's great for kids building their own guitars or music instruments out of cardboard. You'd add some copper tape. Kids build their own switches, buttons, things like that. You can even attach it to, we didn't include these in the kit, but I just wanted to give an example, was this is a standard arcade button. So it's like you go to an arcade, it's the same button you'd find in an arcade, and you can actually hook these up and cut a hole in a piece of cardboard, nut that down, and now kids can start building their own arcade games. The great way to use the MakeyMakey is with Scratch. So Scratch is an open source free programming environment. You can find it at, I'm actually going to add it to the chat window here, scratch.mit.edu. It works with both Scratch 2.0 as well as older versions. For any type of game that your students are using that uses the keyboard and mouse. So they can make their own custom Minecraft controllers, they can make whatever game they're playing, they can make their own custom controller for. Also, musical instruments. If you're using Apple computers, you can open up GarageBand and have each different key be a different musical instrument, and kids can start doing their own music recording with it, building interesting interfaces to the computer that's just really thought-provoking. You hand a kid this and you show them a couple things, and it's amazing what they come up with. So that's one thing that I try to do is I try not to give too much direct instruction around it. I show them how it works, similar to what you saw with Sarah doing, and then let them kind of explore on their own. And you'll get a lot of annoying music and a lot of annoying sound at first, and then at about the 20 to 30 minute mark, you end up that only really they start to settle down and start to really produce some really good projects and start to really think about it. So you have to kind of work your way through the chaos, and then they'll start producing some awesome stuff. So with that, I'm actually going to pause before I go into the digital sandbox. And if anybody has any questions about the MakeyMakey, feel free to ask, and then we can go from there.
I'd actually like to ask you a question, Derek.
Yeah.
I saw something, pretty cool project that Mitch Resnick, who, the MIT professor who's legendary and behind Scratch and many, many other things, sent me a really cool picture a while back about a group of older students, and they created an 80s style arcade.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they used cardboard to fabricate the arcade game housing.
Yep.
And then they inserted switches and things like the one that you showed, that red button.
Yep.
And presumably something like MakeyMakey to control a video screen with a game that was programmed on Scratch. Can you speak for a minute about what that how that comes together?
Yes. I'm actually going to get up and move away from the camera for a second because you're reading my mind. I was thinking about showing this, but then I was like, I don't know, but I'll be right back.
Okay. Great.
So one of the product ideas I've been working on is the idea of what is like a classroom kit look like for the MakeyMakey. Sorry, I'm like crumpling plastic here. But classic arcade joystick, and what it actually has on the back of it, if you can see, are the same switches as those buttons. So if I go up, it's one switch, left and right is another switch. This can easily get hooked up to a MakeyMakey. Kids then duct tape this or whatever to cardboard, or if you really wanted them to glue it or screw it, they could attach that to, and that's their joystick. They'd connect that actually to the up, down, right, left arrows on the MakeyMakey. Mm-hmm. And then you have your arcade buttons. You could build, a jump and attack, your classic arcade kind of idea. But one of the buttons that I love, the big red button, big dome button. So there are plenty of things, especially if you have laptops, where once the kids kind of get the gist of it, is say, now take this laptop and build a cardboard enclosure for the laptop. It's just like the arcade games are programmable, right? I can actually, in the newer ones, I can take a keyboard and mouse and I can plug the thing in and I can program on it. The game that everybody sees is just an application that's open all the time, and so for me to be able to go and just, once I get the game running, put it in the enclosure, and we have this custom controller that we can use. You're getting kids to build things both in the digital world with their game through Scratch or some other means, but then also thinking about how, as a human, how do I interact with it? So you're also teaching user interface, and user interface design is huge, without them really even knowing it, right? If you walked in and said, we're going to teach you how to design interfaces for a computer, all the kids would lay flat and fall asleep on you. But if you were like, we're going to teach you to be game designers and you're going to build your own arcade, you got them hooked. So it's all about how you call things and how you talk to them, right? They're not excited about user interface. They're excited about playing games and how they know how to play a game better than any of us.
That's a great example. I think Vanessa was talking about the Global Cardboard Challenge.
Yeah.
It's all about design higher video game experience, card making controllers. That would be a blast.
Derek, I muted you for a moment because I was getting an echo with Mike. Can you unmute yourself there? Sorry.
Is that better?
Cool. Yeah. Great. We do have a question on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any visual examples of these laptops in enclosures with custom controllers that you can show or that they can see online somewhere?
No. Not that I know of. I think if you, I mean, I could pull up a Google window right now and Google it like everybody else, but it's just, so that was actually, that idea is something that I kind of riffed on with Mike just right now. It's just like, here's what I would do if I was an instructor. The MakeyMakey kind of classroom pack that I'm talking about is something that we're looking at releasing in the next quarter or so. Probably, hopefully for the fall. You know, we're trying to release most of our kind of classroom materials in the fall. And it's something that we call it box it, ship it. Is like we come up with a good idea. There's some ideas where you come up with a good idea and you spend a lot of time making sure it's awesome. And then you just, those ideas that you know are awesome, we just want to get in the box and get it to you guys. So that's one of the ideas, that we just want to get it in the box and get it to you. And then it would be interesting, again, I'm just thinking out loud, if Imagination Foundation partnered with like Hackster.io or something like that to be able to document some of these projects that were happening at different sites around the world. I think that would be really interesting. And if you don't know Hackster.io, it's kind of it's a more friendly, I guess you can say, less ad insertion version of, now I'm having a brain fart.
I did post that link to Hackster and to your Hackster page to all the chapter leaders with the information about their SparkFun kit. So I'll make sure they know how to get in there and post some of their work.
Vanessa, sorry for that question from the audience. We can inventory some of the stuff we have and maybe post because we did get some great pictures from our friend Mitch and others with those cardboard style enclosures for video screens, for computer screens. But there's some great stuff if you just do a web search for cardboard video arcades.
Yep.
And you come across some stuff. In fact, one of our partners, I think it's the Black Pine Circle School, or Black Pine Circle School. They did some great stuff that was combining cardboard arcades with more complex circuits and electronics using MakeyMakeys and such. It wasn't all video style. There was a mix of things. But there's a video about them, I think, in our Imagination Foundation YouTube channel. You can also web search about them. But they just did some great stuff. Middle school kids doing really fantastic games.
I did also want to cover one thing, so that these are called jumper wires. So these come in the kit too, and the headers, these little holes in the back here. A lot of people are like, how do I use an alligator clip with this thing? And you really can't. And so what these jumper wires are for is that they have a little pin, and you insert it into the header. So now I have a wire that I can either stick into a banana or whatever I want, or I can even further connect that with an alligator clip. So it makes it achievable, and we can attach it to different things. Again, if you wanted to connect the MakeyMakey Alligator to the MakeyMakey, we have these kind of dual or two-hole places where it makes it easy to connect, and it's actually, I can tug on this, and it's not really going to come off that easily, so it's pretty durable. I see a question that, is it possible for MakeyMakey to be wireless? There is a kit out there. Our version of the kit we actually ended up retiring for a number of reasons. One of them is that it included a battery, and it's really hard for us to ship batteries these days. But it is a Bluetooth dongle that rides on the back of this with a battery. So there are some people that are out there, I think, that are still making that kit, but it allows you to hook this up via Bluetooth so that you can then take the MakeyMakey and embed it in something and not have to worry about a USB cable. Again, that's another expense. It's not cheap, but it is. If being wireless is really important to you, then that's it.
That's great. I do have a couple of questions, but I want you to move on to the digital sandbox first, because that's probably you have more to say there. So I think that's most important.
Yeah. So this is the digital sandbox. Mine is a little. My 4-year-old took a marker to it, so if it seems dirty, there's purple marker around the edge of it. What this is that we found that for younger ages, obviously it's really hard to build circuits on a breadboard. And little fingers and trying to build things with electronics is really, really hard. And we also found that Arduino is 2 different skill sets that you have to teach. And as a teacher, you want to be able to break skill sets down into achievable chunks, not only for the kids, but also your own sanity. Because you don't want to be having to debug code and circuits at the same time. It makes you want to pull your hair out. There's a couple of ways that we teach that way, but if you wanted to strictly stay in Arduino, the digital sandbox, what it is an Arduino with pre-wired components. So you have a couple sensors. There's a temperature sensor, and we make it kind of a cartoony looking with the circuit board. So there's a temperature sensor, a light sensor, a microphone, a wonderful clicky button, and then there's a switch, a really small switch down here, and then a slide potentiometer. We have a lot of inputs, and then we have a row of LEDs, a red, green, blue LED, and then you have, well, there's a single red pin 13 LED, and I'm going to use that in a second to show everybody. And then we have this little port. And this port allows you to hook up a motor, another type of motor called a servo, a buzzer. So there's a couple of different things that you can hook up there. And then there's a lot of people ask what this is, so I'm going to tell you. This is in what's called an I2C port. And a lot of the more advanced sensors for Arduino are you use what's called I2C communication. So if you're on SparkFun and you wanted to use an accelerometer or a gyroscope or a humidity and temperature sensor, this is where it would get plugged in. But the chip on here, so this is it's actually the same chip that you see on the back of MakeyMakey, is the actual microcontroller that runs 99% of the Arduinos in the world. And we just built it into this form factor so that everything is on its own circuit board and we don't have to mess around with wiring anything other than hooking it up to a USB cable. So I have my laptop running Arduino right now. I hooked this up, and it's going to blind you all to the green LED. And I'm going to show you really quickly how to program this in the text-based, the original Arduino language, text-based language, and then also using a block-based language called ArduBlock, which is very similar to Scratch. So you'll see both versions and how to upload the same program in both. I'm going to switch over to, actually, is there any questions about the hardware before I switch over to software? We all good? Okay. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. And I'm going to open up Arduino. So we have a guide, and I'm going to show you where the assets are on our website for finding everything. But this is Arduino. And I can type. It's basically a text-based editor. So I can type code, or I can just use it as a really hokey text-based editor, and I can type "Hi everyone." For Arduino, there are two main parts to an Arduino program. There's the setup and void loop. So this is called a function. So setup's a function, loop is a function. Someone might ask, what does void mean? Void is basically saying I'm not expecting anything to return from this function. I'm not expecting the function to give me anything back. It's like me just saying, clean your room, and I don't expect you to argue with me. Every function, these major functions have curly brackets. So there's an open and closed curly brackets. You can think of these as if you take your hands, like you're going to eat a giant burger. Now, I don't know about you, but when I eat a giant burger, if I let go with one hand, that burger is going to fall apart. And so we need to make sure that we have these two curly brackets holding our burger together. So in our setup, we have to use what's called a pin mode function. And pin mode is, you looked at that really closely at that chip, it's got little tiny legs, and those are called pins. And we have to tell the Arduino how those pins are used, whether they're inputs or outputs. And in this case, we're going to light up an LED. And we're going to light up an LED on pin 4. So we're going to say pin 4 output, and it's all caps. Output turns blue. And then for me to turn this on, I use a function called digital write. So a way to be able to connect this with kids, digital and analog. Digital is just turning a light switch on and off. It's a light switch. And write, you bring them back to English class, and you say, in English, when a teacher asks you to output something, what are the ways that you output information in English class? This tends to come out, they kind of figure out what an output is first, and then they'll say, well, they asked me to speak. I'm like, well, how about with a pencil? And they end up falling on write. So this is it's a way to output an on and off. And we're going to use pin 4. So we're turning pin 4 on or high. Again, if I flip that light switch up or towards high, it turns on. So this will turn the LED on. And then I'm going to wait 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. And then I'm going to turn it off again. The reason I have this delay function here is because the microcontroller, the chip that runs Arduino, is so fast it can do about 16 million instructions per second. So way faster than we can even see something blink, and so we have to tell the Arduino to slow down. And that's what the delay function is for, is saying, whoa there, turbo, slow down. I'm going to turn it off, which is low. Again, flipping that light switch low. And then I'm going to say delay again. I'm going to put 1,000 in there. Why do I have a delay here is because this is going to turn on for a second, turn off for a second, and then it loops back around to the top. If I don't have a delay here, it will automatically turn on right away. So we need to have kind of a little bit of time so that we can see that it's off. Okay, so we have our set of instructions for the Arduino. The next thing we need to do is tell Arduino, the software, what we're programming and where that thing that we're programming is. So we go up to Tools, and we have to select our board type. Arduino has around, it's probably close to 50, between 50 and 100 different types of boards out there that you can program in Arduino. If you follow our guide, which I'll show you where it is for the digital sandbox, we'll walk you through the process of installing the digital sandbox so that it shows up as SparkFun Digital Sandbox. If I scroll down, you can see that I have a lot of boards. A couple of them from Intel. There's some SparkFun boards in here, but I don't have the digital sandbox. Fear not. If you get to this point, or if you're having issues with tech services and you can't install something, but you can open up Arduino and get things running, the digital sandbox is the same thing as the Arduino FIO. So I'm selecting FIO for my laptop, and then I'm going to select a COM port. So COM port is it's essentially what port your laptop's plugged into. And you can think of that as when you move to a new house, you have to call the postal service and say, I'm living at this new address, and that new address is an apartment. So this is, we're living at Arduino FIO, and that address is COM 148. Most computers, if you plug in an Arduino, the highest number, so you might end up getting multiple COM ports here. The highest number is going to be your Arduino COM port if you have multiple here. So I'm going to select COM. I have COM 148. I have plugged in a lot of hardware. You'll probably have COM 3 or 4 or 5. So in Windows, for every piece of hardware that you plug in, that number will go higher and higher and higher. So I have COM 148. You'll have something a lot lower. And then after that, I can hit upload, which is this arrow. And I'm going to wait for it. It'll say compiling, which means that it's turning this very human-friendly code into ones and zeros for my Arduino. Now it's done uploading, and I'm going to switch back to my camera. And now this is pin 4, an LED connected to pin 4. And now it's blinking once a second. And these are all labeled. These are all labeled so that you can actually so this is D4, D5, D6, D7, D8, and that's how you can tell which pin is which on the digital sandbox. There's actually D13 up here that we can use as well. So that's the text-based hard way, and I want to show you really quickly probably the way that most of you guys are going to use how to program this thing, and that is with ArduBlock. So in ArduBlock, it sits on top of Arduino. And what I mean by that is that it's a tool that's attached to Arduino. So you still have to install Arduino and install ArduBlock, and we have a guide for that. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to Tools, and I'm selecting ArduBlock. And it will bring up this window that will look a lot like Scratch. It's essentially Scratch. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to share my window here. Close this and bring it back up. My bad. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so now I'll go back to Arduino. I'm going to go to Tools, and I want to go to ArduBlock. So again, I've installed ArduBlock, and I have something that looks like this. It looks like Scratch. And if I select things from this, I have a lot of these block-based programs or block bases that I can drag in. Again, since you looked at the text-based version, you know that setup and loop are parts of an Arduino sketch. In ArduBlock, it's actually kind of fun. You can actually just pull in a loop and leave it. You don't need a setup unless there's something very specific you want to add in a setup, and I'm going to show you in a bit why. So I have a loop, and then under pins, I can bring in set digital pin, and it gives me a pin number that I can change. For me, I'm going to, instead of 4, I'm going to say 5. And then I have a little drop-down menu that I can say high or low, and I'm going to select high because I want this LED to blink. And I can click it in there. Under control, I also have delay, so I can bring in delay. and it's already set at 1,000, but I want it faster, so I'm going to set it at 200 milliseconds. I'm going to go pins again, set digital pin, and I want the same LED to turn low this time, so I'm going to say 5, low, and again add that delay at the end. And instead of 1,000, I'm going to change it to 200. Now I have the same program that we just did, just on a different pin in ArduBlock. Again, if you spend a lot of time with Scratch and your kids, this is going to make a lot of sense to them. A lot more than the text-based side of things. And I can then, up here, once I can click Upload to Arduino, and it will upload for me. It's uploading now. And I can, before I leave my window, I'm going to move this to one side because I want you to see something. So once I click Upload in ArduBlock, if I move this to one side, notice what my code says here. Pin 5, it actually populates the Arduino text-based editor so that as your kids are progressing through their programming, you can actually see the text base of what they actually did. And so then they can go back and manipulate this. So if we wanted to change the 200, I can change this and re-upload it and play with the text-based programming. But I'm going to stop sharing this. And as you can see, there's pin 5 blinking a lot faster, 200 milliseconds a blink. So again, there's both of those tools are right there, ready for you. And so, depending on what the skill set of your kids are, you can start them off with Scratch and graduate them to ArduBlock, and then hopefully by the end of your time with them, they can start dabbling in the text-based editing, but they don't have to start from scratch, which is an awesome thing. I did just show a lot without really paying attention to what other people are saying, so I want to make sure that we can answer questions if people have them.
So that little chat bar that we put on the side, I'm getting a little sorry. It's just for us internally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to mute you for a second. Enter. So if people have questions, we have a few viewers on. You can type your questions in to the questions tab on the right. We had one of those pop up, but I'll open up our chat too and see if there are any other questions. I'm sorry, Derek, you can unmute yourself now.
Couple of them here. So one of them is Arduino is Arduino a SparkFun specific language, and it is not. We make a lot of boards that can be programmed through Arduino. You can find Arduino at arduino.cc. It is its own language, and we kind of describe it as if Java and C++ had a baby, it would produce Arduino. So it's kind of a mashup of two different languages, and that's what Arduino is. It's designed to be more human-friendly than a lot of other programming languages. And like Mike said, it is open source, so there's a huge community behind it that's producing libraries around other hardware and adding to it constantly. And it is free, so you don't need to purchase. They do ask for a donation on their website, and I'll let you be the decision-making person on that one, but it is free. There's the question about Scratch working on Chromebooks. So Scratch 2.0 is web-based, so it should work on Chromebooks. The great thing is that it's also account-based, so your students can save their Scratch projects to Scratch's website if they create an account. I don't know what the Imagination Foundation's rules are on accounts and all the security stuff associated with it, and I'll let you guys handle that. But it is really good because then they can go home and work on it, and then bring it back and show you and share things out. So that's kind of one of the things that we really promote. But the last thing is I wanted to show
I have a question.
Yeah, Mikey.
Yeah, it took me a while to get my head around Arduino. Again, not really being in that space of electronics and hearing the word so much in the world that we're in, but frankly not understanding it. And even seeing a microprocessor and still not quite getting it. I just had to start playing with it.
Yep.
And we started playing with some microprocessors and some smartphones in a partnership that we have with Google, which will soon be a part of a video series that we're doing. So it's really exciting. But admittedly, I'm still not really, could you spend just a minute helping us understand the creative possibilities around Arduino? Is there a way that you could just stimulate our imaginations a minute about what's possible with Arduino? What are people doing with it? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes, I know what you're asking, and I'm actually going to give a little bit of background about Arduino itself. So Arduino came out of the design school of Rea in Italy, because what they were doing was they were designing all of these really cutting-edge electronic stuff that you'd see in Sharper Image and a lot of kind of high-end design electronics. But they had no way, they were design students, they had no way of making their products actually work. And so they had a problem that they needed to solve, was that they needed to be able to prototype this in a way that they didn't need an electrical engineering degree to do that. And at the time, the microcontroller, these things, you had to be an electrical engineering student to be able to know how to use this thing. Because this is what you got. You didn't get any circuit board that it was attached to. You got literally this black chip with a bunch of little legs on it. And you had to solder that to a board and wire it up so that you knew how to use it. And so what they did was they created the Arduino so that all of the circuitry to make it work, be able to work, is already on there, and then I can just hook things up to be able to make them work. And since that time, Arduino has become the heart of the maker community when it comes to electronics. It is in anything from your basic robots. So if you see a lot of tabletop robotics, I just came back from the National Robotics Competition a couple weeks ago, and there were fully autonomous vehicles, like RC autonomous vehicles, running around GPS-guided track. So there were, there's about 100 of them on the International Space Station right now, being deployed as either do-it-yourself satellites. So they basically open up the screen door on the space station and kick these things out into low Earth orbit. But they're also running a number of experiments that are sitting on the International Space Station. So you have people using these things to do crazy stuff like space science, but it also runs basic things like home automation. One of the things that I'm actually building right now for my house, I just put in a garden in my backyard, and I'm doing an automated watering system so that the Arduino reads the moisture level in the garden box, and then depending on how dry it is, it will turn on my sprinklers. So it will automate the sprinklers for efficiency, not just, there's a lot of timers out there for the Arduino, but there are not for sprinklers, but there isn't anything that's really based off of the actual moisture content and what your grass or your garden actually needs it. So robotics, do-it-yourself science, people are putting these on high-altitude balloons and sending them into kind of really the edge of space. And that's something that is actually really achievable with kids, especially tethered balloons. You could get a big party balloon at Party City and a tank of helium, and you can put this with a bunch of sensors reading atmospheric pressure and temperature and humidity and see what happens when you let it go 300 feet in the air. And kids, you can let them make predictions and figure that out. Yeah, video game controllers, you name it. If you Googled Arduino right now, you'd get over 1 million hits in terms of things people are building. So there's a lot out there.
That's really cool. That's amazing. There's a question Nancy Tarshish just posted. Can you recommend a website for those who are totally unfamiliar? I believe it's an Arduino-related question to help people get up and running who have never used it. I know you have resources on the SparkFun website.
Yeah, and our resources are designed for like I need to get started. Like I don't know how, I have this digital sandbox thingy. What do we do? I'm going to screencast again here and show. I have a few of them open as tabs. So I'm going to open this up. For the digital sandbox, we actually have 2 guides. We have this guide, which gives you an introduction to the board. What is it? And again, I already went over what most of these things are, and we list them off. So it's a very visual setup guide of how to assemble this thing, because it comes with some assembly required. And then the setup. And so we walk you through getting you set up with Arduino and the different board options that you can have there. And then we also have, so this is if you were looking at text-based, and so we break it out by experiment. So you have literally blinking an LED, like I just did.
Actually, I told you a little bit.
And this is text-based coding. So you have the code right here, and we explain it, how to get started, all the way down to running servos and so on and so forth. The other option, if you want to do ArduBlock, is the experiment guide. So digital sandbox experiment guide. This is with ArduBlock. So the same idea, but with the digital sandbox and ArduBlock. So setting up Arduino and ArduBlock, we give you an install guide of how to get ArduBlock up and running, where to put things. This also includes how to install so that your board shows up as digital sandbox rather than some hokey other board that you don't really know. And then it gives you how to start out in ArduBlock. So we talk about the program, the setup and loop, pin 13, and there's actually even a block that just says blink, so you don't even have to turn it on and off like I did. It's just blink. And then the different experiments, working your way down. What I really like as an educator is this further exploration portion. And that is, it's one thing, kids will, a lot of times, and we've all run into this, they're achievement based, right? Or goal oriented. I got it blinking, I'm done. And what we don't want them, we want them to change their minds from I'm done to I'm blinking, what can I do with this blinking thing? So these questions are kind of guiding questions to slow down that goal-oriented process to more of a creative, explorative process. So both of those guides are here. The digital sandbox kit actually does come with a print guide. So you also have a physical guide as well. These are the online version because I know you probably are going to have more kids than guides. So you want to make sure that all kids can look at this stuff. Last but not least, if you're brave, you can turn the digital sandbox into a Pico board. And if you don't know what a Pico board is, it is a controller board for Scratch. So what we can do is upload a specific Arduino sketch onto the digital sandbox so that it will work with Scratch. And the firmware is right here, or the software is right here to upload. Once you upload, your computer will recognize it, or Scratch will recognize it as a Pico board. And you can go through, this has the step-by-step instructions for how to set that up and set up Scratch. Especially 2.0, Scratch 2.0 will talk to a Pico board, but there's some other software installation process that you have to go through for them. If you're using the Chrome browser, things like that, it does not work with a Chromebook is the sad part. So if you have just laptops, it will work with it, or desktops. But right now, any hardware attachment to Chromebook doesn't really work. If I'm assuming that there are a lot of people out there that have Chromebooks, you can program Arduino in Chromebooks using an app called CodeBender. So CodeBender is that. And if I open up the Sandbox Arduino guide, this is actually a CodeBender window. We've actually embedded it into our tutorial. So you can actually see that I have a Pro Mini attached to it. It's on COM 148. And I can actually run this code right now. I'm uploading it to my digital Sandbox. So that you can actually have students, if they're going through this online tutorial, they can plug in their hardware and run it. And CodeBender works on digital Sandbox as well. So I'm going to turn off my screen share. And again, if people have other questions about that, I know I'm going through a lot, but there is a lot to share, so I want to make sure that people get what they want.
Wow, that's really great. There's a lot of the links that you just mentioned just for our chapter leaders. I have shared those in a previous email with you, but I'll make sure to post these as well for people who are watching this after the fact, as well as some links to Scratch in case people aren't familiar with that. I just want to mention that I'm not sure what happened to Jean Kaneko, but she did not make it on the call. Christina Holzweis is here, who's a chapter leader in New York. She runs a library makerspace with her kids, and no pressure, but if you have anything you want to add about your experience with MakeyMakey and the kids briefly, that would be, we'd love to hear. Okay. Okay, so I think maybe her voice is not working properly today or something. But okay, so oh, okay. So there's a lot of noise on the home front. Okay, so we'll hear about those later. I'm sure she'll post some videos, some pictures for us.
Hey, Vanessa, I can make a comment. It's not in any way a final or summative comment, but I will say that some of what Derek is talking about, although all fascinating, still went over my head. And I'd love us to dig into Digital Sandbox again at another time. I will say that what I like about it, though, is you gave us an entry point just to get started. And that's what's really critical, I think, is just take that device, and you mentioned you just really, it's pretty simple. You just plug it into stuff, plug it into your computer, and it immediately begins to act like a keyboard. So, you know, having kids take Play-Doh or common materials and fruits or whatever and use them to generate sounds is a classic first step with MakeyMakey, but it is incredibly, incredibly useful and really actually mind-blowing for kids who don't have experience with electronics or microprocessors to feel like they built a controller for a computer. So I don't want this to be daunting. You know, I think you presented a pretty wide spectrum of possibility, but I'm just, I guess, emphasizing the entry point is accessible by anybody. Anybody with a MakeyMakey and a banana and a computer.
And Mike, I'd love, and that's something that we can work out with Imagination Foundation, if we want to do a series of, 1 hour hangouts, like, 3 or 4 of them, and just to get people up and running, so that we can record them and have them for later for other people. But, maybe it's Mike and Derek hanging out, and your kid and my kid, and we can get these things working together. And we can kind of work through, do some kind of tutorial videos. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, I see Christina's comments here on the side. Thanks, Christina. I think that's a great idea, actually. We might, Vanessa, maybe we can engineer some live experiments with our kids at various levels and see how they tinker and fool around with it. And I think it'll teach us a lot about how to introduce these products to children and watch them take it and their own creative directions. Be a lot of fun. It's a great idea, Derek. So I'm going to leave it to Vanessa to summarize and Derek to make any other remarks, but that's it for me for the day. But I am super happy to have to hear from you, Derek, and excited by what we can do next to explore the possibility of MakeyMakey and Digital Sandbox. And also, let me say, we're really grateful for our partnership with SparkFun.
We are too. We are too. It's been fun so far.
Great.
Great. Well, it's 7:03, which is no big deal, but it sounds like a good time to conclude. Yes, and I would love to organize those experiments with kids. Always the best way to see how actually things are working and how they're taking it up could be completely different from how we talk about it as grown-ups. So that would be really fun. So stay tuned for those for sure. Derek, that was really great, and I'm going to guide people to this really soon, but it could be really good to do some more concrete tutorials around the sandbox as well, just with some really specific information just for the educators as well and the chapter leaders. So I had intended on maybe talking about how this is used in STEAM and formal versus informal learning environments, but that will be part 2 or 3 or 4. So
one last thing, just as a parting idea, is I'd really, really support people and really push leaders to literally, when you get your kit, unbox it with your kids. And say, have that experience of opening this hardware and being completely honest and saying, I don't know how this works, but let's figure it out together. It makes the experience really flat for kids, and it breaks down a lot of barriers, because then your kids know you're human, and they start to rely, once they figure out that you're not the sole source of answers, they start to rely on each other more, which is what we want, really. So I know that it seems scary to a lot of people to just start and jump in with both feet and not know what's going on. But it's actually, in the end, it's actually really important to do so. And I really, really urge you to do that as an educator, and especially an informal educator. Because it's more about building relationships and getting kids active in it than it is achieving some type of goal or standard. So that's one of the things that I really want to push people to do. And I know, again, it may sound like the crazy guy on the screen and he doesn't know what he's talking about, but like I said, when I started teaching this, I had no idea how to write a line of code or build circuits. So someone that's done it before. And it's hard, but it's worth it for the kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like the way earlier you were talking about how you have to just let the chaos unfold. And for us, our chapter leaders are super innovative and brave and experiment with their kids all the time. So for us, that's just play, and they've embraced that spirit. So yeah, so this is a great tools for them. They're all loving it so much. And I'm getting a little comment up here. I just want to share with you that Hobbs Mueller, we love that you are partnering with SparkFun. We are making music and making lights blink on our clothing. Thank you. So,
good.
Yeah, everyone's loving it. We're getting a lot of great feedback. And we'll look forward to talking a lot more about a lot of different things. This is an awesome introduction, and people are going to find it really, really helpful. So thanks for taking the time. So, yeah, anything else you'd like to add?
And I guess there's more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll sign off. This will be archived on our Imagination Foundation YouTube channel. There'll be an Imagination On Air playlist, starting with this one, and also on our Google Plus page. You can find it, and I'll make sure to make that link public in other places as well. So thank you.
That's great.
So much.
Have a great weekend.
Hey, everyone.
Bye, guys.